While we wait for our moderator, let me just read you her brief biography. Aliya Iqbal is a member of the History Faculty, Department of Social Sciences and Liberal Arts, Institute of Business Administration, Karachi. She also supervises the Senior Thesis Research Program. A former head of the Liberal Arts Program, Indus Valley School of Art and Architecture, Aliya holds a BA and 2 MA degrees from Harvard University and is in the process of completing her PhD from the same institution in the field of Indo-Muslim civilizations. May I request Aliya Iqbal to take her seat on the stage?
Assalamu alaikum, good morning or late good morning. Thank you for being here today. You can't abuse your privileges, Uncle Sallu. It's my great pleasure and honor to introduce and chat with Soniah Kamal today. Sadly, we don't have copies right now of her wonderful book that I managed to read on my Kindle, but here's a copy, Unmarriageable. Good for you. I hunted the country for this. Soniah is an award-winning essayist and fiction writer. Her novel, Unmarriageable, Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice in Pakistan, is a Financial Times Reader's Best Book of 2019, New York Public Library's Summer 2019 pick, Bookbug Best Book of 2019, a finalist for the PHS Reviewer's Choice Awards, and an Amazon Best Books pick. Her debut novel, An Isolated Incident, was a finalist for the Townsend Prize for Fiction and the KLF French Fiction Prize. Soniah's TEDx talk is about regrets and second chances. Her work has appeared in numerous publications, including the New York Times and The Guardian. Soniah lives with her family and teaches creative writing in Atlanta. We got a chance to chat at length yesterday. I have just last night, late last night, finished the book. And it was one of those books that you're sad is ending because you want to live on with the characters. A little bit about the book, at least from my point of view. It is, of course, definitely and at first glance an homage to Jane Austen, with witty references embedded throughout the novel for the delight of other Jane Austen fans. I especially enjoyed the opening chapter. If I have Sonia's permission, I may read from it. Our protagonist is Alisba Binat, who is a high school English literature teacher, and we meet her in her classroom. She is starting to teach Pride and Prejudice to a group of young Pakistani girls, and their first assignment is to rewrite the all-famous first sentence of Pride and Prejudice, and there are real gems in there. But it's also a standalone novel. You don't need to be a Jane Austen fan. You don't need to have read Pride and Prejudice. It is certainly inspired by the resonance between the patriarchal societies of 19th century Britain and post-colonial Pakistan. But it's also a universal story about the lives of women, their traditional roles, and to quote Soniah, the ties of family, friends, and a quintessentially female thing, frenemies. So I think actually I'll begin with a question to you, Soniah. Why did you write this book? It must be the first question you're always asked.
There were two distinct reasons for me to write this, have the need to write this. I first read Pride and Prejudice around when I was 16 years old. One of my aunts had given me a copy. It was a very thick copy, and I remember the first time I saw it, I said, I'm not reading this. I mean, who reads something so thick? I opened it up, I read the first line, which is, it is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. And I promptly shut the book. I said, I don't know what this is about. I am not reading this. And then one day, I guess the weather was really nice, and I finally opened it up, and I read it cover to cover. And it felt to me like a quintessentially Pakistani story. A mother who is desperate to see her 5 daughters married and married well. And this is, of course, Austen's original is set in Regency, England, 200 years ago. And women had very little agency, if at all, at that time, and especially those belonging to the Bennet family in Pride and Prejudice, except for being able to earn a living through being a governess, which Austen wasn't all that fond of. They really did have to get married in order to have some sort of financial security. You know, Austen is often thought of as a romance writer, and I think the dramatizations and movies are the reason for that, because scriptwriters tend to focus on the love stories. But for me, Austen is a satirist, and I mean, she's wonderful, the way she's able to capture hypocrisies and double standards in society, and that really, really resonated with the teenage me, because I could see her characters all around me. Let alone the fact that I never wanted to be a writer, but I figured that, okay, if I ever do write, I'd like to transfer this into Pakistan. But it wasn't until I was older, and I came across the British Empire colonizer Thomas Babington Macaulay's address to British Parliament in 1935, where he sets linguistic policy for the colonies, that I suddenly realized why I was speaking English rather than in some other language. And it really felt very, very necessary for me to sort of reclaim identity and remap and reorient empire's linguistic history in a post-colonial sense, and literally take a British classic and reset it in a post-colonial country, which is why Unmarriageable is a parallel retelling. It includes every plot point of the original as well as every character. Because I mean, one of the Seattle professor called Unmarriageable Macaulay's nightmare, because there's British subjects, or at least colonial subjects. We were supposed to look at British literature and be in awe, shock and awe over it, but never emulate it or take it back. And Unmarriageable definitely takes back identity. And these were my 2 reasons for very much wanting to write it.
You answered my other question, which was, why did you include... So the book begins with a short excerpt that Austen herself wrote on finishing the book.
Yes.
And an excerpt from the very famous Minute on Education, 1835, of Lord Macaulay, which set history and why we're here today having this conversation in English.
Which I do want to say also that, you know, in 1947, when Empire finally left and Pakistan became a sovereign nation, it chose to keep English on as an official language. So often even, you know, I will say English is one of Pakistan's many languages.
Absolutely.
Also. So.
Absolutely.
Are you going to read the
I found them. So, can you repeat the first line of Pride and Prejudice? And then I'm going to read the others.
It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife.
Unmarriageable begins
I had
thus.
to memorize that.
It is a truth universally acknowledged that a girl can go from pauper to princess or princess to pauper in the mere seconds it takes for her to accept a proposal. These are all from the 9th grade female students. Here's another one.
Yeah, the first chapter is set in Alice Bennett. My equivalent of Elizabeth Bennett is a school teacher. She teaches English literature in high school. And the first chapter, she's starting out a new year with her 9th graders. And one of her exercises to, and a lot of the book clubs I visit do this exercise also in high schools where they're teaching Unmarriageable, is that they start with, it's a truth universally acknowledged, and then students or otherwise are asked to complete it. So that's what they're doing, the students are doing in this first chapter.
Another one. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a young girl in possession of a pretty face, a fair complexion, a slim figure, and good height is not going to happily settle for a very ugly husband if he doesn't have enough money, unless she has the most incredible bad luck, which my cousin does. It is unfortunately not a truth universally acknowledged that it is better to be alone than to have fake friendships. This is two young girls who had a fight. Another one, it is a truth universally acknowledged that every marriage, no matter how good, will have ups and downs. That's the class earnest and wise student. It is a truth universally acknowledged that if you are the daughter of rich and generous parents, then you have the luxury to not get married just for security. And that, I think, is what this book, why all young girls now in Pakistan should be reading it, because the message that comes through really clearly, one of the strong themes, is that you should marry for choice, and all the other reasons, or log kya kahenge, which is constantly repeated through the book.
It's actually the name of a column of a society magazine within the novel.
And it's about how these five sisters, modeled on the Bennett sisters from Pride and Prejudice, each find their own way to marriage or not. Yeah. Some of them find their way to independence and self-expression in different ways by the end of the novel. I love the epilogue, which ties up all the loose ends.
Yes.
So one of the fun things about the book, if you're an Austen fan, are the parallel names. They're absurd and delightful, but you can recognize them. Alisba Binat is, of course, Elizabeth Bennet. Her sister Jane is Jenazba. Correct me if I'm mispronouncing any.
It's Jenazba, but she's called Jenna.
Jenna. So. And then my favorite is Kitisba, who becomes Kitty.
Oh, Kitiara.
Yeah. And
Marisba.
Marisba. But some I found, so of course Binat, B-I-N-A-T, Binat or Binat is for Bennett, but it's also the plural of daughters, Binat.
In Arabic, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was cool. And my other favorite is, if you remember, Elizabeth Bennet's best friend, Charlotte Lucas, and how the Lucases were looked down upon because they were new money and came from low origins. So she's Lucas in this, which is a pun on low class as well as Lucas. So all of them you can actually track back to the original in Pride and Prejudice, except for the fictional town in Punjab where they live, which is called Dilipabad. So, Sonia, I want to ask you why Dilipabad?
I will tell you why Dilipabad, but I will also say that, having their last name as Lucas is not just trying to be cute in a classist way at all. It does bring up themes of what class and status mean in a very, very class and status oriented culture and country, and how that changes and what their last name means in the bigger frame of Pakistan. And also I'll quickly mention two other names. Georgullah Wickham is George Wickham. And of course, we all know that there's no such name as Georgullah in Pakistan. But, and Wickham is actually spelled with a double A, so it's Wickham, so ordinary, not mango. And Georgullah is because often in the West, people who go, or sometimes characters, anglicize their names. If not through the pronunciation, then they'll start, Bilal will become Billy or something like that. And I very much wanted to once again reorient and remap that phenomena. So I took George and made it Georgullah. We have Anne de Berg's governess, who is now Mrs. Jenkinuddin. So there's always purpose for whatever choices I've made in here. And Dilipabad is my fictional town where the Bennets live, and I will read out how Dilipabad got its name, which is actually going to be included as an essay at the back in the US paperback version. So you guys are hearing this almost for the first time. So, how Dilipabad got its name. No one was quite sure about the origins of Dilipabad. The town may well have started out as a watering hole for pillaging armies as far back as Alexander the Great. The first name ascribed to the town, myth claimed, was Gorakhana, the home of horses. But then the armies had stopped coming because of some equine epidemic, and the watering hole lay fallow, and the town all but died out. In the 16th century, Sher Shah Suri built a dust road, the travel route for goods and culture and people and languages. A dust road which would go on to be known as the Grand Trunk Road and connect present-day Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, which passed by close enough to Gorakhana. The dust road revived the watering hole for horses as well as camel and elephant-drawn caravans and traveling tradesmen looking for a place to eat and rest and relax. By the time the Mughals came along and paved the road, Gorakhana was famous for its sweet water, silken kebabs, and smooth-cheeked prostitutes. The British East India Company quite enjoyed Gorakhana. It added wild boar hunting to their reveries, as well as partridge and skeet shooting. White officers rated Gorakhana a top rest stop, and Gorakhana, whether due to earnestness or mockery, no one knew, began to be known as Gorakhana, home of the white ones. Many of the white ones, however, perhaps in order to escape boiled cabbage and stewed fruit, adopted local cuisines, habits and customs, and also married native women. After the 1857 rebellion, when natives revolted against the British occupiers, the victorious British began to actively dissuade the white ones from mingling with the brown ones. White officers who had settled at Gorakhana were told to marry white women from back home. Scholars dated the Gorakhana Gymkhana to this influx of white wives. Despite their parasols, the wives were prone to sunburn, heat stroke, irritability, and, most of all, boredom. They required a watering hole where they could gather for a nice lemonade. Originally, the Gymkhana was a tiny club with a room for backgammon, a garden with swans and peacocks, a card room, a patch of lawn for croquet, tennis, and cricket, a shelf for a rotating library, and a hall in which afternoon tea was served by brown waiters in ill-fitting white suits and manual pankhawalas who would, once electricity became common, be replaced by electric fans. But in the meantime, were efficient at keeping hot white wives cool. By the time partition came around, Gorakhana, which the mellifluous Indian tongue had shortened into the musical Gorana, was a bustling town which no longer boasted of prostitutes, smooth-cheeked or otherwise, and that once upon a time watering hole for animals was now a lake at the Gymkhana. Members, the reigning elite who had quickly stepped into the shoes of the departed British, enjoyed fishing and boating on the lake, skeet shooting beyond the lake, and flower shows on the extensive, well-tended grounds surrounding the lake. One afternoon, quite a few years after partition, Gorana VIPs gathered in the Gymkhana library. They were eager to join in the national craze to declare public pride in one's heritage, a pride commonly and readily exhibited through a change in nomenclature. Gorana must be replaced with a Muslim name. A committee was formed. Akbaristan was bandied about, so was Akbarabad, Mohammadabad, Mohammadistan, Islampura, Islampur, Islampur, Islam. The committee had a member who decided Muslim names were all very well, but cultural heritage would give them far more choice. Begum Tabinda Nonehal was an important committee member, perhaps the most important of them all since she was the richest of them all, and could trace her family back to a time without memory. Why not, she suggested, sipping the Abejo, non-alcoholic barley water brewed in Murray breweries and touted to be good for the kidneys, name the town after a famous person, Jinapur, Sir Sayyid Ahmed Khanabadi, Ghalibabad, Iqbalistan. No, said Begum Tabinda Nonehal. Begum Tabinda Nonehal was considering names along more contemporary lines. As they all knew, she was exceptionally fond of films and a die-hard fan of Rajesh Khanna, Devanand and Raj Kapoor. What did they think of Raj Kapooristan? Or Rajesh Khannaabad? Or Devanandpur? Rajesh Khanna was vetoed immediately. He was Hindu, and if they named Gorana after him, then partition, in which 11 million people had been uprooted, displaced, many raped and killed, would seem a mass displacement and murder all for nothing. Devanand was sadly also Hindu. Raj Kapoor was debated. His family was originally from the city of Peshawar, which had become part of Pakistan thanks to the line drawer, Lord Cyril Radcliffe, who, though never having set foot in undivided India, had nevertheless been commissioned to divvy up the country and its people. Raj Kapoor was born in Peshawar. He still had family there. It followed that he may as well be a Pakistani. Raj Kapoor is perfect, except one of the committee members timidly reminded Mrs. Begum Tabinda Nonehal, he too is Hindu. The Begum was miffed but not vanquished. She thought to suggest a woman, but she could not think of a woman who met her high standards, except, perhaps, for the Queen Razia Sultana, the Princess Rani of Jhansi, Fatma Jinnah, sister of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, founder of Pakistan, or his wife Rati Jinnah, but decided against a woman because she liked important actors more than important statesmen, or in this case, stateswomen. She blurted out, Dilip Kumar. He too was from Peshawar. There was not a single film of his that could be objectionable, or a song lyric that was not compulsively hummable. The committee waited politely for her to finish humming, Ye mera deewana pan hai, ya mohabbat ka surur, from the 1958 film Yehudi, about an ill-fated love affair between a Roman citizen and a Jewish girl. Triumphantly, she reminded them that superstar Dilip Kumar was, tada, Muslim. His real name was Muhammad Yunus Khan. Dilip Kumarpur, Dilip Kumaristan, Dilip Kumarabad, Dilipabad. The last was instantly voted yes by all the members, who were growing increasingly eager for their afternoon teas followed by naps. The rest of the town didn't have a say. If anyone objected, they were free to object within the confines of their homes, though Begum Tabinda Nonehal would simply state that those who objected to so fine a name objected due to lack of class and therefore lack of taste. She hoped Dilip Kumar would hear of this and pay her a visit. In fact, she would invite him as chief guest to the name-changing ceremony. Dilipabad. Begum Tabinda Nonehal murmured with stupendous satisfaction as she repeatedly thumped her hand on the table, with everyone following suit, until it sounded like horses galloping at full speed towards the promise of a watering hole.
Fantastic.
So as you can see, it's Jane Austen, but not.
I forgot one of the names I love so much. I was flipping through the book. The evil dragon in Pride and Prejudice is Mr. Darcy's aunt, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, the one who says, "Ye shaadi nahi ho sakti." Yes. So in Unmarriageable, she's Begum Bina de Bagh, because her ancestors were royal gardeners.
Yeah.
Also, and as a sort of penultimate epilogue to the novel are excerpts from this gossip column that exists in the world of the novel, Log Kya Kahenge. And when Janazba and Alispa make these fantastic marriages to Bungles and Darcy.
Darcy because they were Darzies and then they changed their name to Darcy. Which some people will not let them forget because...
So actually, two of my favorite characters are the two sisters who don't get married, Mary and Kitty. Mary is the one who, the earnest, studious one. She's the least good-looking, so she tries to find her identity in being scholarly, but she's not actually that bright. And she, in this book, our Mary turns to religion to express herself and solve her problems. And her quote is my favorite in Log Kya Kahenge. And this is her reflection on the fact that her much older spinster sisters have finally made these brilliant marriages. So Mary says, Shakespeare says, all's well that ends well. God says that too. So you know what that means? Shakespeare was Muslim. And Kitty, in this one, Kitty is the plump one who's very bright and artistic.
She's not plump. She's fat, she's short, she's stocky, and she's squat like me. And every nice compliment that Kitty receives in this novel, I've heard for myself. And I didn't even put the more nastier ones in here because I figured no one would believe them. So she's not plump. She's fat and absolutely okay with that.
What didn't make it into the book?
A lot made it into the book, so let's stick to that.
So this is where she finally emerges. Her comment. My sister Alice, that's Alispa, gave me the magazines. Maud's last issue was published in October 2001. They were forced to close down.
This is a real magazine.
Yeah, fashion magazine. It wasn't circulation. They had plenty of subscribers and were growing by the day. They were forced to shut doors because of lack of advertisements. Top designers only wanted to design for skeletons. Their loss. Fat, stocky, short, squat women are here. We exist. We are visible. What does Kitty end up doing?
Beyond the book? That's for another book.
Okay.
Yes.
So, some of the things, yes, plot point by plot point, and every character is present. There's parallel with Pride and Prejudice, but some characters and some relationships are fleshed out more and differently in your book.
I mean, as much as it is a plot point by plot point, and all the characters of Pride and Prejudice are in here because it is a parallel retelling, I very much introduced new characters and fleshed out and gave a lot of backstories to characters which are in Pride and Prejudice also. So the first time I read it, my favorite character actually in all of Jane Austen's 6 novels is Charlotte Lucas, who's my Sherry. And I remember the first time I read Pride and Prejudice, Austen tells us that, as those of you who have read it, Charlotte ends up marrying Mr. Collins, who is her best friend Elizabeth's reject. And Austen tells us that she accidentally meets him in the lane, and then next we know they're getting married. And I was so curious about this accidental meeting, what was said then, what happened, how did Mr. Collins propose to her? Did he give her the same proposal that he gave Elizabeth a day back? What happened? So I really wanted to work with Sherry's character and flesh that out and give her and Collins and even Mr. Bennet, the father, his own narrative arc.
Yes, that's right.
So, yeah.
So it's not just Sherry's character, but also the relationship between our heroine, Alispa Benat, and her friend Sherry, that is quite a departure, actually, from the friendship of Charlotte Lucas and Elizabeth Bennet.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to explore the nature of friendships in this novel, and not just the nature of them in a static form, but what happens when people grow or change, or don't grow, but definitely change. Because you can change in either way. You can either have good growth, or you can have growth, backwards growth, and what happens to your friendship when that happens. I mean, one of the things that really impresses me about Charlotte Lucas was how even after she accidentally meets Mr. Collins and now she's getting married, and Elizabeth descends on her to tell her what a bad choice she's making and how can she do this, Charlotte doesn't fall for peer pressure. You know, she's a very strong modern woman in that respect. Often we tend to think of her as the poor little Charlotte, the friend who no one wanted to marry, who had to end up with Mr. Collins. But Charlotte, in her own right, I think is a remarkable person because she knows what she wants, she goes after it, and she doesn't really pay much heed to what her best friend says, because she knows what's good for her and what's good for her life. And I wanted to explore that through Sherry's story.
And she has no regrets. She makes the best of it because she knew what she was getting into.
I don't know if she has any regrets.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, she doesn't. Given the choices that she has, she's, and as we see in Unmarriageable, I think for a lot of readers, what I have done with Unmarriageable is surprising them, because they're sort of seeing Mr. Collins through different eyes also. Yeah. Instead of automatically thinking that poor Charlotte had to marry Mr. Collins, they're actually rethinking Collins and Charlotte's relationship and how much of a compromise Charlotte made or didn't make, or in my case, Sherry and Farat Kaleen, because they used to own qaleen in Kashmir, sirf naam reh gaya hai. So.
And the devoted, loyal old maidservant in the Banath household, Helima, can't say Farhad, so she calls him Fart. So he's Fart Kaleen.
Yeah. Actually, the younger sister, Lady. Yeah. Lady starts, my Lydia Bennett is Lady, and there's a reason in the novel for why her name is Lady. As well, I don't know any Pakistanis who are named Lady, but there's always a first. But this was also an homage to Jane Austen. Austen never published under her own name. Her first book was published as By a Lady, and then her subsequent books were by the author of Sense and Sensibility, by the author of so-and-so book. And that was my tribute to. So actually within the book for Austen, like Aliya said, this is very much a standalone novel. If you've never heard of Pride and Prejudice, do not panic. You can still read Unmarriageable, and you'll get it and hopefully enjoy it. But if you are an Austen fan and you're coming from there are a lot of Easter eggs in the novel, and Lady is one of them. And there's Harris Bigwither, if that means anything to anyone, and a lot of Austen references. And there are actually references to all 6 of her novels within Unmarriageable.
I confess I didn't find them all. I'm going to have to ask you. But yes, one should read for that. But it's worth reiterating that as a standalone novel, I think what this book really brings to the reader are these relationships between women, friendships between sisters, friendships between the unrelated Sherry and Alispa. Some of my favorite scenes, and there are a few of them, are of Alispa and Sherry sneaking out of their house at night. They live in a mohalla with a graveyard where no one wants to go, but they aren't afraid. So they go to the Qabristan at night to smoke and hang out and chat. And, and you found a lot of time to put in those scenes and those conversations, whereas in Pride and Prejudice, actually, there's hardly any teasing out of what the nature of the friendship is. It's just a given. Even the relationship between Jane and Elizabeth isn't as fleshed out as between the sisters here.
I tried to put my own little stamp on Austen's classic.
But I want to move the conversation back to Jane Austen for a moment, because as I was reading your longer bio on your website, it said that you are also the Jane Austen literacy ambassador. So what does that mean? What do you do in that capacity?
I've served as a literacy ambassador for Jane Austen. It's a society started by Caroline Knight, who is one of Jane Austen's grandnieces, one of her relatives. It's UK based, and they collect funds through doing different things and promote literacy around the world in different countries. They set up schools and they provide textbooks and things to different schools. So I served as an ambassador for.
And what does the work of an ambassador entail?
Promoting the foundation and gathering funds. But no, it's a very good cause. I mean, all causes which help anyone in the world anywhere are obviously a good one. And the fact that someone who wrote something 200 years ago is now able to provide books and literacy through her name to people around the world is a remarkable achievement, I think, of some sort of immortality.
So that's where I was trying to go with this. Why do you think it's still worthwhile reading Jane Austen? I mean, we know the themes that are of universal resonance that inspired your own novel, but why? Why should we still be reading Jane Austen?
Well, it's worthwhile reading every author. I mean, every author through time immemorial has obviously found some emotional truth within themselves.
But so many don't make it into canon.
Which does not necessarily mean that there's a flaw in their work. Sometimes what makes it into canon is sheer popularity of a certain work or catching a gatekeeper's eye. So, but with Austen, she's had a long history, actually way before the the Pride and Prejudice adaptations that we know. She's had a long history of being from the 18th century onwards. She was a huge icon for the suffragettes when they were seeking the vote. Pride and Prejudice actually first appeared in theatre when I think the men played women's roles and stuff. So her work has always been very popular, and I think it is the thematic material, obviously. I mean, all of her novels address Marriage and love, yes, but I think it's also the social critique that she furnishes. Every society, every person understands that the societies they're living in are full of people who are very interesting, to put it politely, and Austen is really able to pull the onion peels of hypocrisy and double standards. I mean, she's hysterical. I really think if she were alive today, she would have been a psychologist or a psychiatrist, because she can really, really see people. I mean, the wonderful thing, the reason I really admire and like her work is that I don't find any meanness in her novels. You know, she's not an author that resorts to easy humor or even cheap humor. Her character, she doesn't belittle her characters by being mean-spirited and saying that someone is, you know, sweats too much or dances ridiculously or stuff like that. She actually mocks the institutions which give birth to people who play class politics and stuff, and she's very smart in that way. I will say, interestingly enough, her diaries are not that kind. For those who know, her sister Cassandra burned all of her diaries, and scholars and fans will always wonder exactly what was in them, but one of the clues we have is she wrote a diary, and she wrote in a letter to her sister Cassandra, she wrote about a friend who had just given birth and unfortunately died in childbirth. And Austen's comment about that was, she must have finally seen her husband's face, which it's funny, right? But it's also interesting. But you know, but the fact that she doesn't resort, you know, so her private life and her humor and her sarcasm and who she was is so different from the benevolent, kind person she is in her novels, and I really appreciate that divide. I mean, it says so much about her and what she was trying to promote in her novels and the critique she was trying to furnish. But I also think that, I mean, Austen is the creator of indirect discourse, which is actually going into a character's thoughts. And another reason for her success, especially with modern contemporary readers, I definitely think is her pacing is incredible. I mean, if you take Dickens, if you take Thackeray, if you take George Eliot, any of the other British novels, a lot of the other British novelists, there's a lot of dear reader, there's a lot of description, you're directed about how you should feel about certain characters. Austen does none of that. You know, like modern novelists, and almost to say like modern novelists is not fair, because she's the one who was the modern in this case, and the rest of us followed suit. She allows the reader to come to their own conclusions about who is a good or bad character, and what goodness or evil even means in drawing rooms and otherwise. So I think that's the success of her longevity. And also, they managed to make wonderful films and TV adaptations for her.
No, but it's literary merit. Thank you. That was a very articulate exposition on it. And of course, the protagonist, Alispa, being a literature teacher, and the classroom scene, which is quite extensive, she's playing Jane Austen, literacy ambassador, a little bit as well in here. We see her teaching her class Pride and Prejudice. So one girl walks into the class late because she's just got engaged and she's showing off a huge diamond ring.
Yes.
And she says, Miss Alice, Tahira said, sliding into her seat. My mother said I won't be attending school after my marriage, so I was wondering, do I still have to do the assignments? Yes, Alice calmly cut her off, having heard this too many times. I expect you to complete each and every assignment, and I also urge you to request your parents and fiancé and your mother-in-law to allow you to finish secondary school. I'd like to, Tahira said a little wistfully, but my mother says there are more important things than fractions and ABCs. Alice would have offered to speak to the girl's mother, but she knew from previous experiences that her recommendation carried no weight. An unmarried woman advocating pursuits outside the home might as well be a witch spreading anarchy and licentiousness. Just remember, Alice said quietly, there is more to life than getting married and having children. But Miss, Tahira said hesitantly, what's the purpose of life without children? The same purpose as there would be with children, said Alispa, to be a good human being and contribute to society. Look, plenty of women physically unable to have children still have perfectly meaningful lives. And then there are many women who remain childless by choice. Now, the class know-it-all and Tattletale, aptly named Rosenama, glared and says, "That's just wrong." "It's not wrong," Alice said gently. "It's relative." That's a very, very difficult concept to teach in a 9th grade classroom. It's relative. Not every woman wants to keep home and hearth, and I'm not sure every man wants to be the breadwinner, right? "What does he want to do then?" Rosenama said. "Knit?" Alice painstakingly removed a fraying silver thread from her black shawl. "Finally," she said in an even tone, "you'll all be pleased to see that there are plenty of marriages in Pride and Prejudice." And Rosenama is not sure. Disdainfully, she asks, "Why do you like the book so much then?" "Because," Alice said simply, "Jane Austen is ruthless when it comes to drawing room hypocrisy. She's blunt, impolite, funny, and absolutely honest. She's Jane Khala, one of those honorary good aunts who tells it straight and looks out for you." So that's how she sold it. Should we open it up to the audience?
Sure, absolutely.
Questions, comments? There's one right here. Sandra?
Thank you for a fascinating conversation and looking really forward to reading the book. I was just wondering about the title. I mean, there's so many fascinating aspects to the book. What message were you wanting to convey, or what was the idea, the thought behind
Unmarriageable?
Unmarriageable.
Good question.
So I had always wanted to have a snappy one-word title, because I like those myself, but I think they're very easy to remember. And it was really, really hard coming up with titles. And it so happened that my husband and I were in Washington, D.C. He's not going to like me telling this story. But we were in Washington, D.C. arguing about the location of a museum. And I said it was that way, and he said it was that way. And he was right, but let's not go there. But while I was arguing that it was that way, I stomped off that way and I said, "He's so unmarriageable," to myself. And I was like, I have it, I have my title. So, you know, sometimes marriage can be useful. But you know, also, I think that particular word also resonated with me, because I think not just in our culture, but women in a lot of places, and I'm sure some men also, have heard themselves either being described as unmarriageable or have felt unmarriageable at some point in time. And I wanted to explore the emotions behind this particular label, which either you can be given or you can give yourself through the novel. I mean, I have to say, one of the most interesting and pleasant things so far, the reactions I've gotten, is the number of cultures, people reading from different cultures. I've had Jewish readers, Mormon readers, Southern readers in the US, Greek, Italian, Mexican, Indian, obviously Bangladeshi, people everywhere. And they'll read Unmarriageable and they'll say, "This is just like us." And I'm like, "I'm so happy to hear that you're Pakistani." So it's been remarkable to see how it's resonating with different people everywhere. So we're all unmarriageable.
Anyone else?
Well, I have a comment to make, not really a question, but yesterday I attended the seminar on the Begum personal portrait by Rana Liaquat Ali Khan. So I think the same issue was portrayed in that novel also, about how the Begum gets married to Liaquat Ali Khan, who is 10 years older to her. So the basis for marriage is more based on mental compatibility and emotional compatibility, because one complements the other's weakness or strength. So it comes with mental compatibility, and there is no such thing as a class difference or a barrier. I mean, there has to be some sort of a limitation, but if you're happy with somebody and if you know that person really well and you really do like him a lot, and there's no harm in getting married. Age should not be a barrier.
Sure, not at all. And my husband will once again be very happy to hear me announce that he is actually 10 years older than me. But you know, I met him, I went to college in the US and I met him my senior year, towards the end of it when I was actually about to return to Pakistan, and we got along really well. And I proposed to him because I'd always been told good girls don't propose because buri baat, you know. And I was like, well, I like doing buri baat. So I proposed, and he very kindly said he'd think about it. And then he thought about it and said yes. But, you know, obviously there is, you know, he's funny. I like his sense of humor. I like other things about him. He's smart. Those things were very important to me. Different things are important to different people. As for class barriers and things like that, you know, in the West, people will set up blind dates for each other, or even if you're going to dating apps and stuff, you look for commonalities. And sometimes your education is a common factor. Sometimes different aspects of your background can be a common factor. I mean, let's be honest, marriage is really, really hard. Putting two people together and saying, now get stuck with each other for the rest of your life. You know, with friendships and other things, you can actually move on. Something's not working out, you can move on. With your kids, you'd like to move on, but okay, they're your kids usually, so you sit there. But you know, but marriage is a very hard thing. And I think the more factors that you do have in common, perhaps that does help a little bit as the years go on.
Who also started the Jane Austen Society.
Yes.
Any other at the back? There's two ladies at the back.
Hi. So I've read Unmarriageable. I've actually read every single adaptation of Pride and Prejudice that there is out there. Yeah. And something that I noticed in your adaptation was how your Elizabeth is more vocally feminist than the Elizabeth in Pride and Prejudice. And that's something that I felt. I don't know if that's something you intended. Mm-hmm. So that's the first question, was that intentional? And the second, do you think, and I know there's a lot of discourse on this already, but do you think Jane Austen is a feminist writer?
You know, before labels or words come to describe things, for instance, the color red already existed before someone said that this is red, ye lal hai, okay? So feminism and all sorts of things obviously existed in the world because there's certain emotions, there's certain sentiments about how you feel about life and your role and how you want to conduct yourself in the world. I think Austen was certainly a feminist, even if this particular word was not used back then. We see that in each of her novels. Not only are her heroines feminists, but often her men are feminists also. I mean, what does feminism really mean? It just means being able to stand up for yourself, not allowing yourself to be silenced, and being as independent as you can be given your means and the era you find yourself in, be it Regency England or be it contemporary Pakistan. So definitely, yes, Jane Austen was a feminist, as far as I'm concerned, and by dint of that, Elizabeth Bennet certainly is. Her Elizabeth Bennet is a feminist, or someone who stands up for herself very much. I mean, she refuses two proposals, which in her time period, when she had no other access to an income or security, financial security of her own, to say no to a Mr. Collins, a buffoon of one kind, and then Mr. Darcy, a buffoon of another kind, that's a pretty strong, you know, statement of being your own person. Elizabeth in my novel is, well, number one, it's set in 2000, 2001, and it was set in this time period for a very specific reason. But she's she's inspired by Elizabeth, but she's very much her own character also. And, she's very outspoken. She knows what she's saying, and she's not afraid to say it.
I'm going to jump in with a quick follow-up question. Sure. Why is it set so specifically in 2001?
I knew that was coming. One of the critiques often leveled at Austen is that she did not bring in the greater world politics into her novels. So she didn't, she lived through the Napoleonic Wars. Her cousin Eliza was married to a French aristocrat, and he was guillotined. Her brothers were part of the Navy. Her sister's fiancé, Thomas Fowle, was actually in the Navy also and stationed abroad, and he died of a disease. So she was very aware of the military, the Navy, the army, what was going on in the greater world. In fact, in Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Wickham is part of the militia, which is based in the small village. But what she didn't do was, her interests were not to discuss war per se and the fallout or the effects of wars, but she did not shy away from mentioning these things. I wanted to give a contemporary reader a sort of example of this, an emotional example of this. As we all know, a major world event happened in 2001, and one of my sections ends at August 2001, and I figure there might be readers now who are going to expect at least mention, if not a drawn out something about this world event, and it's not even mentioned in Unmarriageable. And I wanted contemporary readers to sort of have a window into what critics say when they say that, well, Austen didn't write about these things, and also have them reflect on, what is the place of certain topics within certain novels. I mean, just because something's happening in the world, does this mean that this particular novel needs to now go into that because it's important or not?
Actually, that's one of the things that often causes novels to become obsolete or feel dated. And perhaps one of the reasons Jane Austen novels are still so read and so enjoyed, because the time period and setting almost doesn't matter. There's such universal human stories about things we can continue to relate to.
Universal human stories, but also the characters. You read any one line of hers, and the way she captures characters and their ridiculousness, you know these people. You literally see, sorry, Mom, but my mom was Mrs. Bennet. She still is sometimes. And, there are Mr. Collins all around us. I'm sure each of you are sitting here. If you look to your left or right, there's a Jane Austen character beside you. It's for you to decide which one. But, her creations are just, they're living, breathing human beings for all their follies and ridiculousnesses. Especially I think in cultures like Pakistan, which are still so very much class and status oriented, as is Jane Austen's world. And she writes about characters like that who give themselves a lot of airs and graces over, just about everything, whether they should or not is a different topic. In Unmarriageable, Sherry's father is Mr. Lucas they don't have money. So his claim to fame is that he went to Hajj once and now he's a Haji. So it's, everyone in their own way likes to build their importance on something, no matter how ridiculous sometimes. And I really admire that about Austen, being able to see characters in that way.
I think we have time for perhaps one more question. I think there was another hand raised. Yeah.
Hi, first of all, I'm really glad that we have a Pakistani writer who has given thought to it. Second of all, that since this novel is set in Pakistan, I was really curious to know that why not a Pakistani name, or a Muslim name perhaps?
Why not a
Pakistani name?
Name for
the protagonist. Why Alice Binnet?
I actually, her full name is Elizabeth. but her nickname, her family calls her Alice, from Elizabeth to Alice. But as one of the dialogues in the novel refers to how to pronounce Alice, Georgiola Wickham is not sure how to pronounce it, and Alice refers to Faiz Ahmed Faiz's wife, Alice Faiz, and she said it's pronounced just the way Alice was pronounced, who was British, but then got married and became Pakistani. And I mean, there's a lot about identity in the novel. There's a lot about linguistic identity also, the divide between Urdu and English in the novel. There's a lot about analogous literatures, which is literature from the Eastern canon and the Western canon. For instance, Mahalakshmi Kapul is paired with Gloria Naylor's short story collection, Krishan Chandra's short story Mahalakshmi Kapul with Gloria Naylor's short story collection, The Women of Brewster Place. Passage to India, E.M. Forster comes up, and the question of whether he's a South Asian, what makes a writer belong to a place? Is it the topic of their book? Is it their birth country? You know, Passage to India is obviously set in India and pre-partition India, so it makes it a Pakistani book also. But is it a Pakistani book? Is it an Indian book? And that is paired with Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, because they're both court cases. They're both about a rape that occurs by a subaltern. And, you know, so there's a lot about identity in this novel also, and various identity. What it even means to be a Pakistani at this point within the world of this novel. It's a fun novel, it's funny also, but a lot of these things do come up.
All the characters have these hybrid names, and I loved that many of them aren't real names, but they could be, you know. There's sort of almost, there's C.S. Lewis quality to them. They're Jabberwocky type names.
They are.
You can feel them, but you've never heard them before.
Yeah, I also didn't want to necessarily name anyone Khan or Chaudhry or anything. I didn't want to be like, oh, she's talking about us. Oh, I didn't want to go there with this novel, because as you've read it, you know exactly why. So I thought it was safe to just make up my own names. And I mean, I've done the same in my first novel, An Isolated Incident, which is actually set against the Kashmir conflict. And it's about a young girl, 19-year-old, and a young boy. And my protagonist in that novel is Zari Zoon. And Zoon actually in Kashmiri, I can understand Kashmiri. My mother's from Kashmir. Zoon means egg yolk. And when Kashmiris read Zari Zoon, they're like, Zari egg yolk? What sort of name is this? And given what happens to her in the novel, I was like, I did not want any Kashmiri to say, oh, she's writing about that person. So I figured no one's name can be egg yolk. So she's egg yolk.
Well, with that, time's up. This conversation, I think, could go on for a couple of sessions. But Sonia, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Aliya, and for the Islamabad Lit Festival, and for everyone.
And everybody, get the book whenever you can.
Please do. Thank you.